My retirement party was still humming when I saw my daughter-in-law's wrist tilt, just a tiny dropper hovering over the champagne flute everyone said was for me. I didn't gasp. I slowed my breath the way a woman my age learns to do when dignity is on the line. I set my camera to watch switched glasses with a smile and began a quiet paper trail that would speak louder than any accusation. That moment was only the opening move in a story of timestamps, witnesses, and truth finding its way to daylight. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. The evening air in the woodlands smelled like magnolia and rain that never came. By 6:30, my house had a soft glow lamps, low candles and glass sleeves on the patio, the great room humming with conversation. I moved through it the way a river finds its banks touching shoulders, names the small luxuries I prefer because they're easier to maintain than grudges. Tonight should have been about closure. I'd sold the consulting firm, signed the last document, let the ink dry. Otis, the AV tech, parked his tablet on the console table by the mantel. Cables braided neatly, speakers tucked behind plants, a projector aimed at the wall where my husband's photo kept watch. A neighbor whispered the setup looked like a wedding. "Not mine," I said, and smiled enough to be polite. I could feel the room taking my temperature, deciding whether a woman of 70 was delicate crystal or tempered glass. At the dining table, a small tented card waited at my place, white embossed at the edges like an invitation. Across the front, in tidy serif type, resident candidate, room 12B. The laugh came from my left, disguised as a cough. "Kidding, Noreen," someone said. Darley's joke about the retirement community tour. A phone clicked. I slid the card into my clutch without a word. Wrong name, wrong room, wrong woman. The paper was smooth, but it scraped. Lyle arrived with Darley in a rush of fragrance and polish. She wore a hostess smile that showed the gums. "Isn't this lovely?" she sang to no one and everyone. "Mom drink," I asked for water. The bartender lifted a flute for me. The slender rim I knew by heart. There, the tiny chip I never throw away, because history is allowed to be imperfect. I set it aside, chose water, and watched the surface steady. The microphone hissed, then the air settled. The MC cleared his throat. "We're here to celebrate a remarkable achievement," he said, "and to thank the family who made this happen. Lyle and Darley, step up, you two," polite applause. I nodded because one nod can steady a room that wants to tilt. The photo over the mantel caught the light. My husband's eyes seemed to absorb the noise and hand it back smaller. I breathed through my belly the way the therapist taught me after a fall, slow counted mine. "Who's managing your money now, Noreen?" a neighbor called out loud enough to be helpful. Lyle answered for me, smooth as a brochure. "We'll take it from here." He didn't look at me when he said it. "At your age, hovered like perfume someone else is too sweet." I tilted my head as if I'd heard a bird outside and let the sentence pass through me. The old me might have corrected him. The woman I am knows corrections are a kind of gift. You wait to see who deserves one. On the patio, the evening felt wider. Magnolia leaves flashed dark and lacquered under the string lights. I could hear the kitchen clatter behind me, the quick staccato of Darley arranging people as if they were flowers that wouldn't hold their shape. I texted Lacey a single heart. She replied with a photo of her sneakers and a note. "Grandma, I'm proud of you." I slipped the phone away. Pride is quiet. So is suspicion when you want it to work. Back inside, Otis lifted a thumb to me, ready for the tribute he mouthed. I stepped near the console to see the tablet to understand the order. A playlist sat open. Family montage. Lyle and Darley, tribute. Noreen, toasts. When Otis tapped the first item, the system skipped ahead to the glossy family montage and stayed there, my reel suddenly grayed with a little lock icon beside it. Guests clapped at the drone shot of their house and the slow-motion tennis serve. Darley dabbed a proud tear. I held my breath and let the applause run its course. In the kitchen, I refilled my water. The island was a runway of canapes and champagne. Darley's tone floated over the marble sugar on a sharp knife. No, the flutes with gold rims go to the bored folks, she told a neighbor, and the plain ones go near the back door. On the tray closest to me, I saw the chipped flute again, nested among perfect glass. The bottle beside it had a ribbon tied so tight it looked strangled. I folded a napkin noting the code cream for welcome charcoal for staff, and one lonely black napkin tucked under the tray, as if waiting for a specific hand. Lyle slid in behind me close enough that his breath cooled my temple. "Mom, don't make this hard," he said softly. "Enjoy the night. We've got the details." I turned, so we were face to face. "Good," I said. "Then you won't need me to fetch anything." He searched my eyes for softness and found glass. The great room swelled for a group photo I had not asked for. I moved to the edge where the light is kinder to older faces. Someone squeezed my shoulder as if I might come apart. I did not. When the flash blinked, I kept the smile a quarter-inch wide and no more. Recognition is optional. Memory is not. I felt for the place card in my clutch, the little knife of it, and held it between two fingers the way you hold a ticket you may need to show at a door you never agreed to walk through. "Speeches in 5, the MC called. Darley's laugh rang out like ice in a thin glass. I stepped back, letting the room take itself. If my tribute came, I'd allow it. If it didn't, I would still leave with everything that mattered my mind, my records, the part of me that refuses to be renamed. I traced the scar on the chipped flute with my gaze, then filed one last detail who hovered nearest the champagne, who watched me watching. Noted, I told myself, and closed the clutch. Link to next chapter. I turned my attention to the drinks table, as if the answer to the evening's tone had been poured there first. I kept the clutch tucked under my arm, the little place card like a blade against my palm, and drifted from the great room back toward the kitchen archway. The light changed there, cooler over marble, warmer over oak, and the sightlines opened. From this angle, I could see the champagne station, the ice bucket sweating a bright ring onto a slate trivet, the rows of flutes catching the pendant lights. I chose a spot where no one had to move for me and where I could see everything without being seen. The laughter from the photo cluster swelled and thinned like cicadas. My breath stayed even. When people expect you to wobble, standing still is a tactic. Darley shifted into what I've come to call her Martha Stewart mode, a gear she never used when the dishwasher needed unloading. She polished stems with a hostess towel, folded napkins into crisp squares, realigned coasters by color as if they were paint chips. "Avery, darling, a little more lemon on the oysters," she told the bartender, and then she angled a small vase of ranunculus 3 degrees so it looked accidental. She rotated the 2 trays on the counter, placing a fresh one closest to the path I usually walk when I fetch a drink. Her lipstick stayed perfect through it all. Precision is a language. I listened. Hands tell you where the power sits. Avery poured from the ice bucket with a bartender's economy. 2 counts pause release. Guests floated in, took what was nearest, laughed apologies when their bracelets tapped glass. Darley hovered just inside the line, not pouring, not partaking, but curating. I mapped the set, the chipped flute mine, by habit 2 positions to the right of the ice bucket stem toward the room. 9 steps from my toes to that edge of the bar, 3 to pivot 2 to retreat if I needed to. The coaster stack sat off-center like a decoy. Every party teaches you a floor plan. I learned this one in under a minute. Her clutch, small and glittering, rode her wrist like a pet. I saw her palm something no larger than a thumb rubber tip dark bulb, the kind of dropper you buy for serums. She turned her body to block, then angled her wrist and touched the lip of a specific flute. Not a poor 1-2 delicate taps. The move was fluent like brushing away lint. She wiped her fingers on a charcoal cocktail napkin and slid that napkin under the far left coaster, as if it were always there. The room filled with someone's story about a lake house. Mine went quiet as a held note. I did not react. Courtesy is armor when it is chosen. I lifted my water, glanced toward the hallway as though summoned, and let a tall neighbor step between us with a joke about Texas humidity. My face arranged itself into the expression people call gracious because it spares them work. Inside my mind opened a ledger and wrote 2 clear lines, "Dropper left coaster." You don't win by being first to speak. You win by knowing which sentence will matter later. Darlie raised her phone, then wrist angled to catch her new tennis bracelet in the kitchen light. "Just a quick story," she chirped to a cluster of guests tilting the camera high. In the screen's reflection, I caught the chipped flute rim, bright as a coin, and a faint swirl clinging to the inside like a thread of oil on broth. Her fingertips hovered in the edge of the frame, then skimmed away. The story posted with a ping I felt in my teeth. I didn't reach for my phone. Instagram saves to highlights. People love to curate their own evidence. Lyle appeared between me and the bar with that bright managerial smile he uses when a meeting is running long. "Mom, you look tired," he said low and smooth. "Let me get you a glass." I touched his sleeve. "Water is fine." His fingers closed on my elbow. Just pressure, just a suggestion that accepting help would be easier for everyone. "We've got you," he murmured. "I know," I said, and stepped back an inch, exactly enough to say I'd heard him and would be doing the opposite. The chipped flute migrated. A helpful hand nudged it toward the aisle, where I always pass stem, pivoted so the lift would be natural. Someone slipped a lone cream coaster beneath it, new not part of the earlier pattern. We splurged on a boutique champagne for Mom Darlie told 2 neighbors, in a voice that made generosity sound like governance. Avery set a fresh bottle in the ice so the label faced the room. Hospitality can be a weapon. The trick is not to bleed. A guest reached for a random glass. Darlie glided in smiling head tilt, friendly. "Oh, that one's for Noreen," she said, guiding the hand to a different flute, as if saving dessert for the birthday girl. The message traveled the way good gossip does, softly, efficiently, no fingerprints. I watched the path clear in front of the reserved glass, the way a chair clears at a table when the guest of honor is late. Otis drifted past with a coil of cable eyes on his tablet. Wi-Fi hiccuped. He muttered more to himself than to me. Uploads lag a few seconds time. Stamps look funny till they resync. He disappeared again behind the ficus, and that was enough. I checked the oven clock, the mantel clock, the tiny second hand on my father's watch at my wrist. The story had posted just before the flute was staged, and blessed. The timing clicked into place like a bead on a string. I angled toward the patio doorway, letting the cooler air touch my throat. From there, I could keep the bar in my peripheral vision and the great room in the mirror over the sideboard. The cookbook stand sat at the end of the island, propped open to a page about Sabayon. A phone could rest there, propped by a wooden spoon camera pointed discreetly at the champagne station. I rehearsed the motion in my head, clutched down phone, out one tap, let the kitchen do the talking. Behind me, someone called for speeches. A cheer went up that didn't touch me at all. I studied the condensation ring under the ice bucket, the way it bled into the slate, and stopped. Limits, I thought, are lines water draws when it meets stone. I reset my grip on the clutch, let my breath settle, and committed the arrangement to memory one last time. The glass, the coaster, the napkin pocketed under the far left disc, the way Darlie's bracelet found the light. Then I stepped forward, still smiling, and made my decision. Link to next chapter. I shifted my phone onto the cookbook stand, framing the bar, and prepared to let the camera see what people preferred. I didn't. You're right. That draft ran long. Here's a Titan Chapter 3 that meets the 500 character requirement exactly and keeps all required beats. I slipped my phone onto the cookbook stand the way I've set down a spatula, 1,000 times casual forgettable. The camera was already rolling screen dimmed so low it looked asleep. From this angle, the lens skimmed the marble island, caught the sweating bottles, and held the line of flutes like small soldiers. The kitchen clock ticked in even seconds. I matched it 4 counts and 4 counts out. Nothing showy. Just a woman in her own kitchen straightening what she owns. Guests moved in gentle tides, laughter perfume a shoulder at the doorway. The chipped flute, my chipped flute, sat at the aisle edge with a single coaster, newly placed beneath it, as if someone had saved me a seat. 2 flutes to its right glinted untouched. I logged the spacing the way I once logged billable hours without emotion precisely. From the pantry jam, I had a clean line on the bar, and the camera did too. 9 steps between me and the aisle. I counted twice to be sure. "Mom let me get you the good one," Lyle said, appearing at my elbow like a stage cue. His voice was warm enough to pass for care if you didn't know its temperature. I lifted my water. "This does the job." He squeezed my arm, a gentle insistence that translated to cooperate. I eased free and glanced past him to the flutes. His smile snagged. Then he drifted away to laugh with someone from the office who still called me ma'am. By the bucket, Darlie shone like a countertop ad. A neighbor praised her bracelet. She tipped her wrist toward the pendant lights. While Sparkle drew eyes, I drifted closer and nudged 2 untouched flutes inward, narrowing the runway to the chipped one. I rotated another glass so its rim faced the wall, tidying, "Not strategy" to anyone watching. I left the suspect flute exactly where she'd staged it. A good trap doesn't have to move. It has to look inevitable. Under the far left coaster waited a cocktail napkin with the faintest smear, a crescent like a thumb's shadow. I slid a clean napkin on top and settled a spoon there, giving myself a reason to save the stack later without questions. I've learned to archive moments the way some women save recipes, layered, labeled in my head, ready when needed. Darlie turned toward me, hostess tone, bright enough to bounce. For our guest of honor, she lifted the chipped flute in my direction, then hesitated, recalculating offering me a different glass, while she guarded the destined one with her other hand. I moved first, scooping the safe flute with a grateful nod and a small smile that read well across a room. The camera would catch her wrist hovering near the chipped rim, 2 fingers careful, then a tiny flick as she reset it on the coaster. She'd appointed Avery the bartender minded the service nook like a man born behind a counter. I brought my safe flute near him as if asking about the label. "Would you mind setting aside the open bottle when you're done?" I asked softly. "I want to keep the label intact for a scrapbook." He looked at the room, then at me, hearing the quiet code between the words. I opened my clutch and showed a nail polish bottle with a brush, thin as a hair, a dot across the cap and lip. When guests tugged Darlie toward the pantry, more ice, Avery stepped into the nook with the opened bottle. I stood shoulder to shoulder with a cousin asking about the yard crew, my voice pleasant enough to camouflage stillness. In the nook, he reseated the cap. I touched the brush to make a single white dot that bridged metal and glass, a promise the seal could not be broken without confessing it had been. He slid the coaster and napkin stack into a zip bag from his kit, and at my nod, initialed the corner. Back at the island, Darlie scanned the room as if she'd misplaced a prop. Her gaze moved from the aisle edge to my hands, hunting confirmation that I'd taken what she reserved. I raised my safe flute in a neutral toast to a group photo I hadn't asked for and took a modest sip. Relief softened her mouth. She touched the chipped rim with a fingertip, then drew back like a pianist marking a cue. I filed that too. The second hand reached the 12. I crossed to the cookbook stand and checked a recipe, one tap stopping the recording and sending the footage into the quiet dark of my camera roll. The phone slid into my clutch on top of the place card from earlier resident candidate 12B paper against glass insult against record. A neat stack. I passed through the great room and without breaking stride touched the frame that holds my husband's photo. He's grinning in a fishing shirt, sunlight turning his ears pink. Early on, my hand found that frame like a life ring. Tonight, it was a different anchor. Grief taught me one useful thing for evenings like this. The body can learn new reflexes. Mine has learned to reach for the steadier choice. Lyle intercepted me between sofa and coffee table. "Mom, you sure you're eating casual enough to pass as kindness?" "I am," I said, holding his gaze until he looked away. He glanced toward the kitchen, then at his watch, then at Darlie. She gave the smallest nod, a metronome click between conspirators. To most, they were a handsome couple managing a party. To me, a pair keeping time to a plan. From the doorway that frames the kitchen, I could see all I needed, the chipped flute at the aisle edge. Condensation spreading a dark ring around the ice bucket's base, the faint crescent of the older napkin now preserved in a bag beneath a bartender's initials and a time. 2 guests leaned in for selfies. The lights added a false warmth to everyone's skin. Houston humidity did the rest. Across the island, Darlie lined up fresh flutes with a decorator's eye, as if symmetry were salvation. She centered the coaster under the chipped glass again. We thought of everything she told a neighbor. The neighbor who meant well said, "You're a blessing." Blessings, in my experience, are quiet. What people announce out loud tends to be something else. Avery passed behind me with a tray toward the patio, sparkle and carbonated noise. He didn't look at me or at the Nook. That's what I liked, help that doesn't need credit. The kitchen clock clicked into the next minute. In my pocket, the nail polish felt cool against my palm, the way a fountain pen once steadied me before a hard meeting. Near the mantel, a guest asked about the narrow brass-edged frames. Restoration hardware. I said an answer that landed like a weather report. The party hummed. In my head, vigilance shifted to order a recorded angle, an untouched glass, preserved where the camera saw her hand, hover a marked bottle, a bagged napkin with initials and time. Not a victory anchors enough to keep me from drifting when the next gust came. I moved to the family collage wall school photos, Sunday fishing the old dog who used to sleep under the table. People say the past is another country. I think it's an attic you live below and still feel the weight above. I pressed my fingers against the place card until the cardstock bowed. Paper remembers pressure. So do people. On the service shelf behind the pantry door, the dotted cap waited. In the lower cabinet, the initials on the bag would be dry by now. I wouldn't reach for either yet. You don't swing at the first pitch when you've learned how often the pitcher telegraphs. Applause rose as someone announced dessert. I stepped into the doorway so I could see the aisle edge and that chipped rim without being seen seeing it. Vanilla citrus, the faint metal of ice tongs crossed the air. I felt older, yes, but not fragile. Experience is just muscle, built in a different gym. I stood there long enough to let the room move around me. A guest in a blue dress set her purse on the island, blocking the chipped rim for a beat. When she lifted it again, Darlie slid the flute back to the edge, ready for my hand. I did not oblige. I asked Avery for a splash of club soda in my water and thanked him for keeping the bubbles gentle, while he poured his eyes flicked once to the cookbook stand and back. He did not need to know more to know enough. Lyle reappeared with a plate I hadn't requested 2 strawberries and a wedge of cake. "You'll feel better if you eat," he said. I set the plate on the side table and asked about his project deadline. He smiled, but it was a smile that lived only in the teeth. He told me not to worry about work anymore. "We've got the logistics," he said, and the plural sat between us like a closed door. Behind him, Darlie rehearsed a laugh that carried across the tile. I returned to the pantry jam and checked the clock again. The dot on the cap would be dry by now. The bag would hold the napkins flat, the crescent preserved in the exact quadrant where I had found it. If anyone opened that cabinet, they'd find tonic and plastic cups. If I opened it, I would find a record. That is the difference between invited and owner. It is subtle until it matters, and then it is everything. On the island, moisture gathered around the bucket in a widening ring. I watched Darlie's hands. She fussed with coasters that didn't need fussing, moved flutes that didn't need moving narrated choices that were never hers to make. A neighbor asked where she learned to entertain so well. "Practice," she said, and looked straight at me. I held her gaze until she had to look down to adjust a napkin that sat perfectly fine. Avery brushed past and asked just for me to hear whether I preferred the second bottle, chilled a little longer in the back fridge. I told him yes, please. He nodded and disappeared, leaving only the quiet confidence of a plan that did not involve drama. I sipped water, tasted nothing, and decided to keep it that way for the rest of the night. Above the sink, the window showed a cut of dark trees and a porch light halo. I kept my posture easy and plain, linked to next chapter. The first push will arrive with a smile. At your age, let us help, and I'll answer on my feet with documentation that never raises its voice. I re-entered the great room as the laughter swelled and the champagne loosened edges that had felt sharp an hour ago. My tribute still hadn't played. The TV above the mantel kept looping other people's milestones. I marked the nearest exit, the AV cart's line of sight, and the orbit my son held always within 2 conversations of Darlie never in mine. I stood where the room's reflection lay over my husband's photo so I could watch without being watched. Lyle arrived with a smile stitched to concern. Mom, at your age, nights like this get overwhelming. Let us handle the details. He spoke as if my future could be bulleted into a brochure. You relax. We'll take it from here. I appreciate the help, I said, and I'm comfortable finishing tonight exactly as planned. He searched my face for a wobble and patted my arm. I moved toward the hall that connects the den to my office. Darlie intercepted with a hostess whisper. Have you eaten? You need to keep your energy up. She tucked a glossy trifold into my hand. Its edges were flagged with neon tabs. The cover showed oak trees and smiling couples with coordinated sweaters. Inside, a page on admissions had yellow. A page on cognitive screening support had pink. I slid the brochure into my clutch and kept moving. From the den corner, Otis cleared his throat. Ms. Noreen Quick, heads up. He angled the AV tablet so only I could see. We ran your tribute twice in rehearsal. Perfect. On the screen, the rehearsal log showed green check marks with timestamps. Below the event timeline listed my reel as ready, then skipped. A thin arrow traced a manual tap. Someone chose skip. In the great room, Lyle lifted his voice just enough for a nearby circle. Mom's earned a break, he said, arm open like a stage direction. We're exploring options close to us so we can be hands-on. Best for everyone. Polite nods moved. I harvested only the wording, we exploring options. The verbs didn't fit in my mouth. Lyle drifted back lower. After tonight, we can tour a place this week. They prefer early paperwork. His hand slid to my elbow to steer me. I stopped before pressure became movement. Not tonight, I said in a voice that could have been discussing cake. He felt the line and withdrew his hand. I took out my reading glasses, opened the brochure long enough to confirm the tabs, then closed it with 2 fingers the way you close a book you've already read. I returned it to my clutch. Seen, not agreed. Darlie watched from the doorway, smile, lacquered eyes busy. Otis, steady as a metronome, murmured again. If you want copies, I can send screenshots. I nodded once. He tapped, then showed me the addressing line with my email entered. Rehearsal. Okay, the subject read, event skip. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Proof moved closer. Back near the mantel, I let the room's color wash over the glass that held my husband's grin. Lyle's laughter spooled out bright and easy. Guests passed with plates and compliments. I thanked and moved on. On the AV cart, the playlist marched forward as if nothing had been missed. My tribute now lived in an email I alone could open. I read the tiny type resort-style community continuum of care personalized assessment. I let the phrases fall. The folded napkin in my clutch pressed my palm. You don't have to raise your voice when the facts know your name. Lyle tried once more, softer. Mom, you know we only want what's best. I looked at the mantel clock and answered to time instead of him. I'm finishing my evening as planned. He nodded in that way people nod when they plan to proceed anyway. Darlie touched his sleeve and they turned to greet a couple. I crossed to the AV corner under the pretense of admiring flowers. Otis kept his posture neutral. Scent, he whispered. I checked my phone under the bouquet's shadow and saw screenshots in my inbox, the rehearsal checks, the event queue with my real grade, the finger path that hopped past my name. I forwarded the email to myself and saved the images to my receipts folder. Conversation swelled, dessert plates clinked. I touched the mantel frame and met my eyes in the glass. Older, steadier. By the pantry, a dotted cap and an initialed napkin waited. In my clutch, a place card and a brochure sat beside my phone. Everything had a folder now. Lyle's voice carried again about links and amenities. I gave him my boardroom smile and let the room's talk carry me. I lingered by the fireplace long enough to hear the same compliment twice and to note who echoed it. Across the room, Darlie staged another row of flutes and squared a vase as if symmetry could pass for sincerity. For now, I gathered the night into simple nouns: email brochure, napkin bottle sun. I repeated them once under my breath so I would not be tempted to argue with adjectives. When you strip a moment to its nouns, it tends to hold. A guest asked if I had travel plans now that I was free. A few, I said. Closer to home than people expect. She laughed and moved on. I checked the reflection. Their postures said momentum and polish. Mine said, finish what you started. The TV flipped to a photo of Lyle as a boy with fish his father helped him catch. I let the ache come and go like a tide, then squared the brochure in my clutch so its edges met the place card. Order does not forgive, but it steadies the hand that decides what to do next. Okay, link to next chapter. I would step into my office, call counsel and a quiet investigator, and begin turning careful notes into a clean chain of custody. I excused myself with a smile that read one quick call, letting the party keep its momentum, while I slipped down the hall to my office. The door closed to a respectful hush, laughter muted ice tongs, a faint clink. I set my clutch notepad and glasses on the desk, straightened the lamp so its light sat square, and breathed once. No drama, just order. Marcia, hi, it's Noreen, I said on speaker. Possible tampering with a drink tonight. I preserved a bottle with a marked cap, a napkin stack in a zip bag, and the AV tech emailed proof my tribute was skipped, manually. Her voice came warm and crisp. Good. Write an evidence memo. Who handled each item, how sealed, where stored, and when. Photograph placement with a visible clock. Keep it cool out of reach. Do not confront anyone. Understood. I dated the top line and wrote bottle opened at bar. Cap reseated. White dot bridging. Cap and glass. Witness by Avery bartender. Time from kitchen clock. Napkin stack bagged. Initials AP. Time spoken aloud. Bag sealed. Video phone recorded angle of bar, then saved. Loop in Maura, Marcia said. She'll ask for angles. I tapped the next contact. Maura, I need a quiet checklist. You'll get it, she said. 3 photos wide of the station from your vantage medium of the dotted bottle close of the bag, showing initials and time. No flash. Keep people out of frame. Text me the times. If the AV tech can sign a short line about rehearsal versus show, get that. I said and opened the door. In the service nook, Avery lifted his chin. Ready? He murmured, handing me the dotted bottle and the bag. I held my phone, low-framed the kitchen clock over his shoulder, and took a wide shot flutes in rows, ice bucket sweating the aisle edge where the chipped glass sat. A second shot on the dotted cap. A third close on the bag's corner where he had written AP and the time. I whispered the minute as the second hand crossed 12. Avery added his first name and role on a small note and slid it to me. In the laundry room, cool and high, I set the bottle upright on the top shelf and tucked the bag into a bin labeled Party Supplies. I stepped back, photographed their placement, locked the cabinet, and dropped the key into my pocket. Housekeeping with a spine. Back at the desk, Marcia's email landed, chain of custody simple note. I copied its bones and filled the blanks item handler timestamp, storage location witness. I signed photographed and replied to Marcia and Maura. Subject Noreen initial custody notes, May 17th. I forwarded Otis's rehearsal screenshots into that thread so the sequence would live together. Air felt thin. I stepped to the porch. The light made a gold circle. Cicadas stitched the trees. A rideshare idled at the end of the cul-de-sac. I texted my granddaughter a small heart and let the quiet mend the fray in me. Inside dessert, laughter rose and fell like a tide. I chose not to fight. Noreen, the voice came from the side path by the gate. Arliss stepped into the light, Darlie's mother, who wore grief like a careful coat. Her hands trembled. Do you have a second? Of course. I guided her to the bench. She had a little dropper, Arliss said, voice barely there. From her clutch. I told myself it was vitamins for your energy. I wanted to believe her. Her eyes shone. I watched her angle her wrist over a flute with a chip at the rim. Then she wiped her fingers on a napkin and tucked it under a coaster. "Are you all right?" she asked quickly. "I'm safe," I said. "I didn't drink from it." Relief loosened her shoulders. "I didn't raise her for this," she whispered. "I know I said meaning more than one child. Would you be willing to note what you saw simply? No accusations, just details." She nodded. "Yes." I put Marcia on speaker. Her tone softened. "Arliss, thank you. We need only what you directly observed and heard. Your name, the time where you were standing, and what you saw." Arliss repeated the outline, then began name time. About 9:48 kitchen doorway by the flowers position. What she saw, the dropper, the wrist, the napkin tucked the chip on the rim, and the phrase for mom. Her signature shook on my notepad. I took a close photo, then a wider one that included the porch light and her watch for context. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. We slipped through the side gate so she wouldn't have to pass the bar. At the latch, she squeezed my hand. "You deserve that tribute video," she said. "They practiced it." I saw them. "I have the logs," I said. "Tonight we keep our footing." "All right," she whispered and moved toward the driveway light. I returned to the office and laid Arliss's signed page beneath the printed chain of custody email thread. The bottle was where I placed it, the bag where I left it, the Times in ink. On my desk, the order of things calmed the air-wide photo medium close. Initials, dots, signatures. I smoothed the paper once turned off the lamp and heard the party breathe beyond the door. I did not feel triumphant. I felt anchored. Before leaving, I texted Maura the photo times and BCC'd Marcia from my personal account. So if anyone questioned sequence later, the trail would mirror the minute hand on my kitchen clock. Link to next chapter. With the evidence safe, I would follow the paperwork why the brochure tabs were pre-marked, who assembled an admissions packet, and what motive sat waiting between the lines. I switched on the desk lamp and let the warm circle of light settle across the office, like a calm verdict. The chain of custody note from earlier lay at the top of my desk, edges square to the wood, a quiet flag of order. I opened a fresh legal pad and drew 3 columns with a ruler's precision: who, what, when, how. Tonight was no longer a celebration. It was documentation. Marcia's name lit my phone. I tapped speaker. 2 sentences, she said, her voice crisp as a paper edge. I gave her the condensed report-sealed bottle marked cap-bagged napkin timestamps captured. She dictated a brief memo handler's Times method of sealing each detail like a brick in a wall I intended to build. Photograph every placement, she added. Cool cabinet, no one else's reach. This isn't paranoia, it's preservation. Before I could set the phone down, Maura joined the call. The private investigator's tone was low and direct. "Here's what I've got so far," she began, and the facts landed like small gavel taps. A mid-sized life insurance policy naming Darley as caregiver beneficiary. A pre-scheduled capacity screening for me the week after tonight. A fast-track request to a senior residence near their house. Dates, requesters, confirmation codes, each read aloud, each written into my columns. My pen didn't shake. "Check the foyer mail console," Maura said. "Tracking shows a USPS packet delivered Wednesday at 2:17 p.m. addressed to Lyle." I left the phone on speaker and walked to the front hall. The console drawer yielded a manila envelope, the glue already slit. Postmark Wednesday. Inside a glossy welcome pack, floor plans for a resort-style residence and a checklist with my name pre-typed across the top. I carried it back to the office and photographed it against the desk clock 10:34 p.m. before sliding the photo into my secure album. The checklist was obscene in its tidiness boxes, already ticked beside family representative Lyle financial power of attorney pending, capacity evaluation suggested. I circled each phrase in red and wrote them again under the what column. Paper has a way of confessing. Maura's next email arrived with a soft chime, a scanned life insurance policy Darlie listed as beneficiary for caregiving considerations, application dated 3 months ago. Marcia's voice cut through the silence. Do not confront. Keep gathering. The law rewards patience. Another attachment, an intake email politely proposing a geriatric capacity screening, scheduled for the week after tonight for her safety. I underlined the appointment window the way a surgeon marks an incision line. Maura forwarded a call note next family requests expedited placement due to concern for safety, Lyle named as caller. I wrote a single sentence under how narrative safety to justify control. A ping from Otis the AV tech sealed the pattern, a timestamp of the rehearsal where my tribute video played flawlessly. Public erasure, private control. 2 lanes, 1 goal. 10 minutes later, Maura appeared at the side patio gate, a shadow among the garden lights. She handed me a small USB drive through the barely opened door. I signed a receipt she'd prepared and posed for her phone, holding the welcome pack beside the foyer clock for proof of time and custodian. We exchanged a quiet nod, no need for words, and she vanished into the night. Back in the office, Marcia summarized the architecture of motive policy for profit. Capacity screening for leverage, fast-track admissions for removal. This isn't care, she said. It's a transfer of control design. You're documenting beautifully. Rest soon. Tomorrow we escalate. I slipped the welcome pack into a new folder and printed a single label in capital letters, Paper Trail. On the legal pad beneath every careful column, I wrote one final line, I will not be moved like furniture. The house hummed with the muffled laughter of guests who believed the party still belonged to them. I switched off the lamp. Evidence, unlike champagne, does not lose its spark overnight. Link to next chapter. Street-level proofs would come next yard, cameras, delivery slips, and a neighbor's quiet footage waiting in the dark. Morning light edged through the blinds while the house still smelled faintly of last night's champagne. I brewed coffee and set the paper trail folder from my office onto the counter. The quiet felt deliberate, like a pause before a verdict. I pulled on latex gloves habit from years of meticulous work and opened the under-island recycling bin to begin a careful sort. If the night left clues, they would be here. Under a layer of paper plates and lemon rinds, I found a thin cardboard mailer addressed to Darlie. Inside was a folded packing slip, botanical extract concentrated, 30 ml complete with lot number and a purchase date from the week before the party. Cold certainty settled in. I photographed the slip beside the microwave clock, 8:17 a.m., and slid it into a clear zip bag. Across the seam, I wrote my initials, and the recovery time then logged the find on my yellow legal pad. Item 1, packing slip. 8:17 a.m., custodian Noreen. Before the garbage truck made its rounds, I wheeled my bin to the curb with the lid slightly ajar. Houston humidity clung to my skin. In the gutter near the driveway, an amber cap rattled like a tiny confession. I snapped a photo in situ, bagged it, and marked the time, 8:32 a.m. 2 entries on the pad, now slip and cap, each a neat line of proof. Across the street, Camilla Duffy waved from her porch. We'd traded cuttings of rosemary and basil before. Today I asked a different favor. Could we check your doorbell footage from last night? I'm tracking a missing package. She ushered me in without hesitation. Together, we scrolled through the timeline until the video froze at 10:07 p.m. Darlie in a pale wrap, glancing left and right before tossing a small amber bottle into my outdoor trash. The time overlay glowed crisp on the screen. Camilla exported the clip and emailed it to me and to Maura, my PI. I recorded the file hash in my notes, while Camilla signed a short consent line I drafted on the spot. Camilla Duffy provided footage dated May 17, 2025, 10:07 p.m. A photo of her signature and the email confirmation joined the growing evidence chain. Back home, I stepped into the side yard where the oleander hedge bordered the patio. Mr. Rios, my landscaper, met me with a puzzled frown. These cuts aren't mine. he said, pointing to fresh, angled stems. Rough, hurried nothing like his clean pruning. He texted me close-ups while I bagged a few fallen leaves in a paper envelope, labeling it with time and location. Oleander carries potent alkaloids. I wrote exactly that on the pad. By late morning, the kitchen table had become a command post. I ruled 3 columns across the yellow sheet: item, as in time, custodian. One by one, I filled the grid packing slip: amber cap, doorbell clip, oleander leaves, Rios photos, each entry precise as a ledger. Beside oleander, I added possible source of alkaloids. Mora called while I was still writing. This triangulates procurement, disposal, and potential toxin source, she said. A minute later, Marcia texted, maintain non-confrontation. You're building a case as strong as chain steel. I uploaded every photo and Camilla's signed consent to our encrypted folder. Both women sent confirmations within moments. Outside, the sanitation truck clattered past, but my recycling bin stood empty. I had already claimed what mattered. I rinsed my coffee mug and set it down like a period at the end of a sentence evidence bags lined neatly beside the paper trail folder. Linked to next chapter. The honeypot for power of attorney and the attempted account access waits for tomorrow's light. Daylight slanted across my desk like a ruler marking the next step. I set the paper trail folder and yesterday's evidence grid in a neat stack, then pulled a fresh legal pad toward me. Across the top, I wrote a single word, honeypot, and underlined it twice. Marcia and Mora joined a 3-way call within minutes, their voices calm as if we were planning a garden, not a legal snare. We agreed. Create a decoy power of attorney packet, baited with a bank account that couldn't be touched, but would record every attempted trespass. With Marcia's guidance, I phoned the bank. Ms. Klein from the fraud department answered with professional warmth. Together, we opened a standalone checking account carrying exactly $1. Heightened monitoring, real-time alerts, she said, assigning a case number and a dedicated email route for logs. I drafted a PDF titled POA Packet Draft, weaving in a canary phrase only Lyle would recognize from childhood, a nonsense nickname he once gave our cat, and a fake account number tied to the decoy. The phrase's presence would be silent proof if it ever surfaced elsewhere. At 1:47 p.m., I sent an email to Lyle with a soft subject line, organizing notes so you don't worry. I attached the PDF and BCC'd Marcia and Mora for a baked-in timestamp. The canary phrase lay inside like a hairline crack in glass, visible only when struck by light. I saved the sent email and jotted the exact minute on my pad. Next came the bank's countermeasures. Ms. Klein enabled real-time alerting. Any login attempt, password reset, or multi-factor request would ping her Marcia and me simultaneously. She dictated the rule set while I wrote each clause and added the case number beside it. The account itself was inert $1 and a firewall of monitoring, but it carried the promise of a trap door. The house settled into a patient hush. I cooked a late lunch, set my phone face down, and let the afternoon stretch. On the pad, a single line waited for a trigger that might never come. Evidence, I reminded myself, breathes on its own. You don't chase it. At 3:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a bank alert: failed MFA on decoy account. I flipped the screen. An email header followed seconds later: origin IP geolocated to Lyle's neighborhood Wi-Fi. Ms. Klein froze the account and generated an event report before I finished my breath. I took a screenshot of the alert, the time glowing in the corner, and forwarded it to Marcia and Mora with the subject, Decoy Touch 3, 42 p.m. Another ping, the system logged a missed MFA text request. I photographed my lock screen to capture the timestamp and sent it along with the header file. Marcia replied within minutes, attaching a temporary restraining order, draft names and dates left blank but ready for a judge's signature. Her message read only, hold steady. Paper wins. Mora cross-referenced the metadata. The canary phrase was copied to a clipboard event at 3:41, she texted. That matches the failed login to the second. Her note landed like a steel pin closing a hinge. My phone lit with 2 calls from Lyle. I let them ring into silence. A text followed. Saw your packet, proud of you. I archived it without reply, my quiet refusal, a wall he could not see but would feel. Evening lowered itself through the pines outside the window. I printed the bank's event report, the MFA screenshot, and the TRO draft, filing them beneath the tab marked Honeypot. On the last line of my pad, I wrote, "When they reach, they leave fingerprints." I switched on the porch light and watched it pool across the driveway, the trap already sprung. Linked to next chapter, tomorrow's brunch with Arliss will turn pressure into public proof where their reach for control backfires in the daylight. Morning sun bounced off the chrome napkin holder as Arliss and I slid into a window booth at the Purple Finch Diner. The clink of cups and hiss of the espresso machine felt almost friendly, a shield of ordinary sound around something less ordinary. Arliss's eyes showed the night she hadn't slept. I ordered decaf for both of us and placed my clutch beside the salt shaker. We'd agreed on the phone, no raised voices, no accusations, just what we knew. The bell above the door jingled. Darlie and Lyle entered a minute apart, as if by chance, but with the same glance that told me they'd rehearsed it. I shifted deeper into the inside seat, keeping the aisle clear. The waitress, Tessa, poured water and smiled like she'd stepped into a family brunch, not a quiet tribunal. "We're here to clear the air," Lyle said, settling across from me. I nodded once, nothing more. "I'd like to set the rhythm," I said, evenly. "We speak in turns. We stick to dates and documents. If voices rise, I leave." My voice carried just enough to reach them, but not the next booth. Darlie smiled too wide, her fingers drumming the edge of her napkin. Arliss folded her own napkin in half and breathed through her nose, steadying. Darlie went first, as I expected. "The party got chaotic," she said, her tone sweet with a grain of grit. "The kitchen was a mess. I think things just got mixed up, Mom. Maybe you were a little overwhelmed at your age." Lyle slid in his piece. "We only want you safe." I let my breath count to 4, then another 4, each inhale a small barricade. I opened the clutch and laid a single page on the table, the USPS tracking printout stamped "Delivered Wednesday." Secta 17 p.m., the welcome pack addressed to Lyle with my name pre-typed. Beside it, I set a screenshot of Otis's AV rehearsal log, green check marks followed by the word "skipped." I sipped water. No commentary. The paper spoke louder than anything I might add. Darlie laughed, a light clink of sound. Paperwork mixes up. I stayed silent. I drew out the packing slip for a 30-milliliter bottle of botanical extract and placed it by the creamer. Next, the doorbell cam export receipt stamped 10:07 p.m., her silhouette bending at my curb, amber bottle in hand. Silence thickened like syrup in a cold pitcher. Tessa set a plate of eggs between us and backed away, sensing the hush. Lyle reached for the papers. I tilted them just out of reach, then slowly rotated the tracking sheet so he could read every line. He swallowed throat tight and looked to Darlie. Arliss's hands, which had trembled over coffee, went still. I spoke at last, reading 3 dates Wednesday packet delivered. Saturday, 8:42 p.m. AV rehearsal check. Saturday, 10:07 p.m. trash toss. These are the times. I am not confused. My voice held no anger, just fact. Arliss cleared her throat and added the sentence she had rehearsed in my car. "I saw you with a dropper by the champagne." Her voice wavered once, then steadied. Darlie's jaw tightened. Tessa returned with a refill pot. No one touched the eggs. I slid the diner check toward me and spoke to the 2 across the table. "My attorney has secured everything we've shown today. I won't discuss placement or power of attorney again. No threat, only boundary." I set my card atop the bill before Tessa even reached for it. Outside the booth, I paused by the door. "You may call when you can speak in facts," I told Lyle, each word quiet enough for only him. Sunlight flashed on the hood of my car as I stepped into the parking lot. In my clutch, the documents rested like a second heartbeat, quiet, heavy, undeniable. Linked to next chapter. The legal filings and the attempted counter-narrative will meet in court where the temporary restraining order and lab report queue take center stage. I set the lamp low, opened my laptop, and pulled up the draft that had waited in my inbox since yesterday temporary restraining order draft. The cursor blinked beside blank fields for dates and exhibits. I added what already lived in my folders by muscle memory. Welcome Pack USPS WED 2, 17 p.m. AV LogSat 8, 42 p.m. Skip doorbell clip, Sat 10:07 p.m. Packing slip lot number visible. My fingers did not shake. When everything read like a ledger, I whispered file and clicked. Marcia joined by screen share her voice a metronome. We stepped through the e-filing portal caption parties requested relief exhibits, alphabetized. I signed the affidavit digitally, my name appearing in a font that looked more patient than I felt. The portal spun, then returned a line of text as clean as a sentence, submitted 2:14 p.m. A minute later, a second line accepted cause number assigned hearing TBD. Marcia copied the number into the subject of a notice email and sent it to opposing counsel. I watched the message leave my outbox with the quiet satisfaction of a door latching. "Here's the mirror you use," Marcia said steady. "Transfer of control design under the guise of care." That's the case in one line. If you must speak to anyone official, keep it to 3 sentences. The dates, the items, and nothing that sounds like how you feel. I repeated them until they sounded like I'd learned them years ago. Wednesday packet, Saturday AV skip, Saturday trash toss. She exhaled. Good. The facts carry better than any voice could. On the front porch, I called the number she had texted. Detective Pena answered with the professional calm of someone who spends his days sorting noise from signal. I gave him only a spine, the date of the party, the suspicion of drink adulteration, the steps I had taken to preserve items, and that counsel and a licensed investigator secured storage and logs. He read back a case number, spelled my last name, and gave me instructions for a safe digital drop. "No one's knocking on doors today," he added. "We plant the first pin and make sure everything you have can stand." I said thank you like a promise. Maura pushed a single exhibit's PDF to my drive hash value at the top, like a fingerprint. I uploaded it to the police portal and typed the case number carefully the way you type a bank routing number. On my legal pad grid, I wrote, Case Pena, and the hash, then drew a line through the task as if I were balancing a checkbook. I don't need victory. I need order. Courier Jules arrived with a hard-sided case and a form on a clipboard. We met on my stoop, the afternoon heat soft at the edges. I brought the sealed champagne bottle with the nail-polished dot and the bagged napkin dark coaster initialed by Avery. Jules scanned each item. My phone pinged with matching intake barcodes. We both signed the chain of custody line, our names side by side like 2 ends of a bridge. He slid the case into his trunk and drove away without drama. I let the porch door close on the light scent of pine cleaner and paper. The spin arrived the way spin always does, fast, soft, and aimed at sympathy. Maura forwarded a next-door screenshot, a smiling profile photo, and a paragraph about elder confusion, hurtful accusations, and a plea for prayers. Comments climbed in a familiar pattern, a dozen hearts, a few nods about caregiving. Being hard, one neighbor I've known for 20 years writing. She's always been so gracious. I didn't write back. I didn't even frown. I saved the screenshot with a timestamp, and the post URL filed it in a folder named Context Public. It's not evidence of a crime. It is evidence of a strategy. I sent the image to Marcia and Detective Pena with one line, for context only. No response planned. Marcia replied within a minute. Good. Let the docket speak. I closed the email and listened to the house breathe. The refrigerator compressor hummed and stopped, and somewhere down the street a delivery truck released its air brakes with a sigh. The ordinary sounds felt like guardrails. Per Marcia's note, we drafted a short affidavit addendum, 3 anchors, 1 sentence each. 1 USPS delivery on Wednesday to my son, with my name pre-typed on admissions forms. 2 AV rehearsal logs showing my tribute ready later skip during the event. 3 doorbell clip at 10:07 p.m. showing a woman matching my daughter-in-law's silhouette depositing a small bottle in my trash, later retrieved. No adjectives, no interpretations, just the spine. I signed and e-filed the addendum, the system stamped received 4:02 p.m., and slotted it beneath the TRO in the docket tree. For a human call, I chose only one number, Arlise. I said when she answered, "I'm calling to tell you the steps not to ask you to choose sides." I explained the filing, the police intake, the lab courier. "Thank you for keeping it clean," she whispered. I could hear a television in her living room turned low people on it, pretending to speak to each other kindly. "We will stand where we must," I said. That's all. We wished each other a decent dinner. There are mercies you can offer, even now, brevity. Clarity, the option to rest. The sun slid toward the pines. My porch flag lifted and fell once like a slow breath. I printed the cause number and pinned it above my desk with a brass tack. The rows of folders were no longer a pile. They were a map. Lab intake court, TRO police case context public. In my inbox, a short message from Ms. Klein at the bank, checked in fraud watch, remains armed. No further attempts since yesterday. I wrote bank D&D on my pad and drew a box around it. No impulse calls. No high drama. The rails are laid. The train moves because steel does what steel does. At twilight, I brewed tea and carried the cup to the mantel. My husband's photo looked out over the quiet room, his eyes squinting against a sun from a different summer. "It's all in motion," I told the glass, which told me nothing back. I thought of the comments swelling under Darley's post and felt nothing I needed to say out loud. Let them think what they want in the spaces where facts don't fit. I'll meet them where facts live. By the time the sky turned the color of nickel, my inbox held 3 confirmations. Court accepted, police received, lab in queue. The house settled into its evening creaks. I placed the TRO printout beneath a paperweight and turned off the lamp. Linked to next chapter. Tomorrow, the cause number becomes a hallway outside a courtroom. Temporary orders a misstep under oath in the Oleander lab's first word. Looking back, I learned this love needs boundaries. Documentation isn't distrust, it's protection. And quiet is not surrender when it's backed by action. If you're facing pressure wrapped, as care write things down, save the receipts, and ask for help early. Choose facts over fights, dignity over drama, and build the paper trail that keeps you safe. In this country, our elders deserve both respect and autonomy. Families are strongest when we honor both. What would you do differently after hearing my story? Have you ever set a boundary that saved you? Tell me where you're watching from. Drop a 1 or your city. If it didn't land for you, say why. If this touched you, please subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next true human story.